So I wanted to help the people who are highly conscientious, doing the work, but not necessarily communicating about the work because they're still in this mindset from school that you just turn in your excellent work and that's all. And that's just table stakes. That is not, It'll take you in a corporate world, it'll take you to a certain level, but it will not take you to the top.
Hey everyone, you're listening to the Lively Charleston Podcast. Our goal with this show is to interact and tell the stories of the amazing people, places, and businesses that make Charleston the best city in the world.
If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.
And check us out on Instagram and Facebook where we post content regularly throughout the week. All right, Miss Laura Camacho, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us, for being a guest on our podcast here. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I am super pleased to be here, to be a part of this Lively Charleston podcast. I think it's so good for the people that find out like the inside of what's going on in our amazing location, Metro Charleston.
We do live in an amazing city, and there's a lot of really cool people doing cool things, and you're one of them. And that's why you're here, and we want to talk to you and learn more about what you're up to.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So you are the founder, the owner, the CEO, the originator of the Mixonian Institute.
Yes, at the Mixonian Institute, which rhymes with Smithsonian, everybody. And so my maiden name is Mixon, which is a South Carolinian last name. So I was in love with the Smithsonian, and I created the Mixonian Institute.
I love it.
Isn't that funny?
I'm glad that was going to be one of my questions. We were going to get to that, how you came up with the name. But so it's your maiden name.
Yes.
With the Smithsonian.
Yes.
And you came up, so you're the one and only.
The one and only,
Mixonian
exactly.
Institute.
And it's not the best marketing name because people don't know how to say it or spell it. But as a friend of mine said, it's so bad that it works. And definitely you have to work at it to get the spelling and the pronunciation. But anyway, that's the story behind the Mixonian Institute.
Okay, and at the Mixonian Institute, yes, you serve to help leaders communicate their ideas with more impact.
Correct. That's absolutely true.
So I think that is what you do is amazing, and it's very impactful, and it's I'm sure very fulfilling. And we're going to talk about all this and how you got to where you are. Mm-hmm. But if it's okay with you, let's take it back a little bit and then catch up to present day.
Absolutely.
Okay, beautiful. So, Laura, you've been in Charleston for 13 years.
Yes. And
when you were a child, mm-hmm, you wanted to be an international businesswoman.
That's right. Even though I didn't know what that was.
I love it. So not like most boys want to be like a baseball player or a fireman or a superhero or something. And then what do most little girls typically, what's their...
Is not being an international businesswoman.
Yeah, that's a rare one.
And I wasn't really sure, but the story with that was when I turned 9, I got to have a spend the night birthday party. And the theme was come as what you want to be when you grow up. And so they were, being a movie star at the time, that's what we called being a celebrity, was a big thing, or a teacher, nurse, or doctor. But the thing is, I was really lucky for my time in that my grandmother was close friends with 2 women from the wrong side of the tracks who were both single moms who started multi-million-dollar companies. So I grew up with that as a possibility. I didn't know how to build that, but I knew that you could, and I knew that I wanted a part of that. And in fact, my first experience flying on planes with my grandmother was always flying first class, but I didn't know it was first class. I thought that's what I thought all air travel was. Whoops, it's not that way.
You were one of the kids that when the people walk by first class and they give them the look like,
yes,
you don't even know you're sitting
yes,
in here. Yeah.
And they're right. But I knew that I wanted to somehow, I knew about foreign languages, I knew about travel, and I knew about owning a business. So I didn't have a clue. And my dad was a dentist. My mom was an English teacher. So they were not like entrepreneurial, but that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. When I was young.
Okay. And you mentioned that your mom was friends with a couple of businesswomen that grew these big mega companies. These are not just any businesswomen. Right.
One of them was Mary Kay Ash, who started Mary Kay Cosmetics. And the other one is Mary Crowley, who started a lesser known but still multi-million-dollar company. I think it was called Home Goods, both based in Texas. Texas is famous for producing bold women. And of course, South Carolina does too. And yeah, that I knew about them, and my grandmother was always feeding me stories about her, because she actually worked with both Marys in a company that's similar to like what Amway is now. It was called something else.
Okay. Wow. And so she had a relationship with them, and before they were who they became.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And how did the conversations you had with her lead to you wanting to, like you said, you wanted to be an international businesswoman, which you now are.
Yes.
But how did that, did you have any sort of a picture of what it might be? Did you know what sort of a company you might want to start, or you just knew you wanted to start something?
Yeah, I really didn't know what that would look like. And I certainly didn't know what a communication coach was. In fact, back in 2009, not many people, including myself, were really clear on that. And so I studied in college. I studied Spanish and French. I knew that languages were important. I studied economics also, and I got a minor in business. So I was preparing myself, but I didn't have any mentors at that time. In fact, most people, when I would share my dream, they would say, "Oh, you should be a flight attendant." And I was like, that's really not what I had in mind.
Not what you were thinking.
Or you should be a translator. And I was like, no, that's not it either. In fact, of course, this is, way back. I remember interviewing for one bank, and they were like, why would we want somebody who speaks Spanish? We'll just hire a translator. And then here's another one also showing, how far we have come, is that I was living in Dallas. It was an international department of a bank, and I was like, that's the ticket. But I had to pass a typing test, and because that was not on my plan, I failed the typing test not once, not twice, but 3 times. So that's when I got my MBA in international and specialized in international business, and then I ended up moving to Venezuela. So it was like, well, doesn't matter what I do, it'll be international because I'll be living in a foreign country.
And exactly. So now you're an international business. Check the box.
Yeah, check the box. Exactly.
Successful. So how did you, growing up so you grew up in Hampton, South Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes.
How did you then end up working at a bank in Venezuela?
Oh my goodness. Well, again, after going to college, and I was working for a local bank. It was not international, and that's a lesson here. That, of course, this is before the internet, so you couldn't just Google 1,000 things. You had to know people who would tell you, and I just didn't know, and my parents didn't know, and it just didn't know what to do. But I figured out, well, I'll get that. I was living in Dallas. I'd moved to Dallas, Texas. My mom was from Texas, and I saw this program at the University of Dallas. That had specialized in international business, which at the time was still kind of a rare thing. And then I met this super handsome, charming, hardworking engineer. And, our first date, he said, well, I just want you to know I'm from Venezuela, and I want to go back there as soon as this program is over. And so we got married, and I moved there with him. Ah,
okay. That connects some of the dots.
Yes,
all right.
Exactly.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So you wind up in Venezuela with your new husband?
Yes.
Working at a bank?
Yes, working at a bank, working one of the top banks in Venezuela. Great experience in the multinational section. So here, I really feel like I'm moving towards my goal. I still don't know, what is my international business going to be, but I knew I was dealing with international transactions, currency transactions in a country where at the time, as now, they have limitations on currency exchange, and the whole concept of price controls was new to me. The concept of certain products getting a more favorable price currency exchange rate than another. I was learning all that. So I was learning a different culture. I was learning, in fact, with communication, that when in a society where institutions don't work as well, you have to have good interpersonal communication. You don't just go up and get a driver's license. No. They make it almost, the test was impossible. But if you make points with certain bureaucratic people, things work, and if you don't, they don't. And they once lost my passport, but I had to call a friend of a friend, and suddenly they found my passport. But things like that are just like on the daily. So I learned so many things that we take for granted here in the United States, like electricity and water working all the time, just to name something, or being able to open and close a bank account very easily, that stuff.
Yeah.
That was just a huge learning for me,
Yeah.
Jeremy. I'm so grateful for that. It was hard. There's a high crime rate. Somebody moving from the South to an international city in a developing country. There were a lot of crazy things, like go to the grocery store because of price controls. They would not have coffee, or not have chicken, or not have Coke, or not have this or that. So it was a master's in international economics living there.
And and just a lifestyle shock.
Totally.
It sounds like, right?
Yes.
Which can be, I imagine, can make someone tougher.
Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe help, paint some of those stripes that you might need as you move into being an entrepreneur.
Bingo.
And some of the challenges there.
Yes, exactly. And, I grew up in a very protected home, and it's just nice for children to be protected when they're young, but it's also nice to get a little dose of reality, and getting a dose of how the rest of the world lives was definitely valuable for me.
So we transitioned from working at this bank to you are a contributor to an economic newsletter.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so I imagine taking some of the skills you learned at the bank, and now you're a writer. You're communicating about economics.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I tripled my salary. I mean,
yes, that's a win.
That was a win. It was a smaller company. A very tiny company, compared to a big bank of a publication. But our clients were the Fortune 100 companies that were operating in Venezuela, the local multinationals, all the big companies. And that was another deep dive into the economic realities, and how forecasting, for example, is so much more difficult in a country that's more volatile. And, the world at that time in the United States, I don't think was as volatile as it is now. But back then in Venezuela, it was very volatile, and, high inflation, currency problems. Lots of things to take into consideration for planning for a business made it more challenging.
Absolutely. I can imagine, especially, the whole international, there's just so many additional wrinkles, I imagine, between the language and the currency and the politics. And
the culture and expectations. Yes, you're right. And things that you just don't know, and things that you may take, 10 classes in international economics, but you don't really get it until you live it.
So we transitioned from the economic newsletter to then being a bilingual management newsletter.
Yeah, I created. That was my first baby.
Okay.
That was my first baby. That was my first attempt at Laura's international business, because I was taking like the latest from Harvard Business Review or Forbes, whatever I could get my hands on, the latest business books, and just like summarizing their ideas. Of course, there's lots of services that do that now, but this was me back then doing that in Spanish and English. And so that was my first, and I did it in partnership with my employer. So it was an entrepreneurship. He handled the distribution, because in Venezuela at the time, as now, the mail doesn't work. You just don't put something in the mail. I mean, that's just like throwing it in the trash. You have to have your network of motorcyclists who will take and hand deliver your mail.
Interesting.
So imagine the cost of that, right?
Yeah.
So that I was able to piggyback on their system of the motorcyclists who delivered the mail
to ensure that they got where they were supposed to go. Okay, got it.
So more lessons, distribution, but also I think I've always been fascinated. I think the theme that is just like the power of knowledge. Like when you learn something, you can make better decisions.
Yeah, 100%. You see the puzzle more clearly, right? With every new piece that you get clarity on.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is your process, and then you become a facilitator for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of my favorite books by Stephen Covey.
Yes, that was such a great experience. And again, that came because of an article I wrote where I quoted Stephen Covey. So the world that was reading it could see that I had read the books. And so that organization reached out to me to to be a facilitator for them in Spanish. And so that was my first training. I think it was my first. I also developed, I don't know if you know this, but always, this is the problem solvers. Like I go to Venezuela and I see that time management seems to be an issue. And so I'm like, that's easy. I'll just teach them time management. So I developed a course called, in Spanish, Productividad Personal, personal productivity.
I love it.
And, it was not like an overwhelming success, but I definitely taught it to some of the top companies there. And, it was my grain of sand. But yeah, that class and then being a facilitator for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People showed me that there's a market for continuing education, because the way the world is changing and companies need their people to be more astute, to be more skilled, to know more things, and it's a constant process, right? You're never done. And so that learning, then that's when I learned that, actually teaching, because I'm a 4th generation teacher. My great-grandmother was a teacher on a Native American reservation. And my grandmother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, and I was not going to be a teacher, but I was going to be an international businesswoman. But I was able, I got to see that there's a market for not a product, but a service that is aligned with learning, which is something that, is very important to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so with that, how did you transition from that role where you were the facilitator for this and you were teaching the productivo, let's see, what was it?
The newsletter? Or the class, the Productividad Personal?
Personal productivity, that
yes.
one. How do we transition from that into now the Mixonian Institute and your current mission and the people you serve now?
Yes, because now Mixonian Institute is definitely the product of that newsletter. And what happened was, well, as I mentioned, economic volatility in Venezuela. My husband lost his job. I was pregnant with our 2nd child, and he ends up getting a job with a company, a small international company in eastern North Carolina that makes truck bodies. And so we moved from this city of 5 million people to 10,000 people. And here's a story on that move. So I'm so excited to get to return to the United States, even though I had a great experience, but I'm just so excited. And that whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say when they ask me, Laura, what was it like to move from a city of 5 million people to a city of 10,000 people? And you know what? Nobody ever asked that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I ended up working in the university. I got a job, teaching about communication, about because I had worked as a professional writer, like they needed people, and and then I ended up getting my PhD, and I just had this realization that it's not just doing the work; it's being able to sell the value of the work you do that is the success skill. And so the Mixonian Institute, I ended up getting the PhD, getting laid off, getting divorced, and what do? Well, start a company, right? Now's the time. And so that was the beginning in 2009.
Okay, got you. And so so now you've compiled all of these skills, and you've you've put them, like you said, transitioned from the service to now having a product and service, kind of a meld there.
Right.
And who did you want to help? Was your initial target audience the same as it is now when you started the Mixonian Institute?
It's similar. I wanted to, okay, so here's the deal, Jeremy. There are people that, were you a good student in school?
I was an okay student. When I turned it on, I could nail any test, but turning it on was sometimes an effort.
And did you ever sweet talk the teacher into giving you extra credit or opportunity for points
Not really. I wasn't a good politician.
No. Well, I saw this in college, and when I was teaching, I was on the receiving end, and I can tell you it's very effective. These people like you that were super smart, but not really that motivated. Whereas I was the student, turned in my work.
Yeah.
Always got those A's, but I would see these people like Jeremy, but more politically astute, and say, "Oh, teacher, my grandmother died, and
just work you over."
Yeah, and I sprained my thumb, and it was just so hard. Could I just have a few extra days?" And then getting out of school, seeing how that skill, that political astuteness, that ability, the daring to even the audacity to ask for extra credit or ask for things. It pays off.
Yeah,
Guess
it
what?
works, huh?
Yeah, and so a lot of that I attribute to introvert, extrovert, that continuum. Susan Cain's book, Quiet. I don't remember the rest of it. Something about how to maintain your sanity in a world that won't shut up. But she really legitimized the idea, the concept of people that are introverts have things to say, but have a harder time sometimes expressing themselves. And there's other people that don't even know what they're talking about, but they figure it out and they say stuff and they move forward and they just don't let that hold them back. So I wanted to help the people who are highly conscientious, doing the work, but not necessarily communicating about the work because they're still in this mindset from school that you just turn in your excellent work and that's all. And that's just table stakes. That is not, It'll take you in a corporate world, it'll take you to a certain level, but it will not take you to the top for sure.
I love that you put it that way. I have an analogy that I use with when I'm consulting with folks or when I'm working with agents on our team, where, like you said, it's table stakes, right? So you have if you play in the World Series of Poker tournament, you have to pay the $10,000, right? But all that gets is a seat at the table.
Right.
That doesn't guarantee a win or that you get any money back. All it gets you is an opportunity.
Exactly.
Right? So you don't get a cookie for paying the $10,000, right?
Exactly.
So I think similar to what you're saying is doing the great work. That's kind of just the cost to be at the table.
Exactly.
Right? And then to have an opportunity to win, it requires some more of these skills that you're teaching people.
And it's really what I've learned with my experience. It's really just helping them to see it in a different way, because a lot of times, like, we see someone who just talks their head off. Maybe they come across as a little bit annoying, self-absorbed, and so this high-performing, highly conscious introvert thinks, well, I don't want to be like that. And so they're seeing it as a false dichotomy of either I'm talking in my head off and being self-absorbed, or I'm quiet. And that's not true at all. It's really thinking about it differently. And it's really, Jeremy, as I'm sure you'll see this, you know this, that speaking up in a meeting, speaking up when things don't seem to be going your way, that's actually helpful. Just because something hasn't been said doesn't mean it shouldn't be said. Just because things don't go your way in the meeting or the proposal doesn't mean that people aren't better off by hearing your dissenting opinion, for example.
Absolutely. I love the I don't know if you would call this your elevator pitch. Let me read it and then you can tell me what it is. But I love how you have it worded. It's because it's so clear. I help highly conscientious. Let me start over. I help highly conscientious high performers, makers, and creators get more green lights. The people I serve tend to feel awkward in some aspect of their communication, and together we obliterate that blocker to pave the way to achieving their next career goal.
Bingo. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. What I didn't know when I started is that how many people like that are out there in the world.
How big your market is. Yeah.
Yes. And COVID, in a way, helped me, the lockdown, because companies started shifting their learning and development resources to coaching. And I discovered there's just this immense world, especially in technology, also in finance, in any company of people that are exactly that, highly conscientious. That means that they're paying attention, they're crossing the T's, dotting the I's, really doing quality work, and they are high performers. But if it's a big company, for example, they may not be known outside of their immediate group, and it turns out that once you make it. You may make it to like the level of director, which is kind of like the middle of an organizational structure. But making it above that, it's about allies and people that go to bat for you. And to do that, they have to know you and they have to like you and they have to trust you.
Right. And you have to participate in the communication for these things to happen.
Right. Just like starting in a business context, you know that you could have the best real estate agents in this area, but if nobody knows what you do, for example, and people know about it.
And they have to know, exactly.
That's why it works. But just being good at your job is not enough.
Amen. Amen.
And if you're an introvert, it's just like, it can feel awkward. Like, how do I, because we've all been on these conversations where it's like, oh, hi, Jeremy, I'm Laura. I sell communication courses, and they really help people to communicate better. Like, that's being too transactional too early, and that's not effective. It's not pleasant to be a part of. And so how do I talk about myself and my accomplishments and my work in a way that is not annoying?
Right. No, absolutely. So we have a couple minutes left here. And what I want to do first is highlight the book that you wrote, which you identified as one of your top professional achievements.
Yes, it is. Thank you. It's a guidebook. It's called The Practical Guide to Effective Communication. It is not a book to read from cover to cover unless you're really struggling. It is a book that every chapter could be its own book. Each chapter is a use case. Like, do I want to show up better in meetings? Do I want to have a better presentation? Do I want to be more emotionally intelligent? Chapter by chapter, there's exercises. But it's also about how to think about it. Because if you get the mindset right, then the techniques will fall into place.
Beautiful. So it's something that can be read through, but also referenced and come back to over and over.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. I want it to be on your desk, on the desk of everybody that works for you. And when they have a high stakes meeting, go look at it, and I promise you'll get some inspiration. And there's lots of culture stories in there, and there's lots of exercises to get better.
Well, I purchased a copy, and I will have it on my desk to reference. So thank you so much for that. Additionally, you've landed some big clients. You have Google as a client.
Yes.
You have, just to name one of many. And so you serve not only big companies where you do, individualized training to help them be better communicators.
Right.
You also do workshops for small businesses. You do one-on-one. So what sort of services do you offer if anybody's interested in working with you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I through the work, I didn't see this when I first started, but over time I began to see, especially with the international background, because we didn't get into it, but I've also lived in Spain and Germany. So I've lived in different countries and seen how cultures can be different. That knowing the language is one thing, but I remember in Venezuela showing up at a birthday party 15 minutes after the start time, and the people were still not even dressed. So just to give one example. So that culture and communication are tied together, because even though you think about the culture is how people do things, but it's mostly expressed in the communication. So with smaller companies, we do a workshop that combines communication skills, like seeing communication as an opportunity to serve and to build the culture. How can we work on both of those? Because working on culture is kind of an amorphous thing. How do you do that? We're going to have, maybe a ping pong table. Well, that's the stereotype.
Gotta have the ping pong table, yeah.
But maybe nobody in your area likes ping pong or is very good at it. So with smaller companies, I tend to work with that intersection of communication and culture. So they get 2 for 1. Everybody comes out with a much better understanding of how to communicate better and how to build their culture. And culture just makes a huge difference.
Amen. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, learn more about you, where should they go?
All right. Well, my website, which is brand new, and I love it, I don't know how many people are in love with their websites, but I love mine. And you go to Speak Up with Laura. SpeakUpWithLaura.com, and you'll see it. Andrew Barton did the graphics, and he did the site. It's just very cool. Or on LinkedIn, it turns out, though, as everybody has learned, you thought that you were the only one with your first and last name, but no, there's 5,000 others. In fact, yesterday I got a thank you note for this book about a guidebook to Chile, to the country of Chile. I've never even been there. But somebody named Laura Camacho, and apparently in Amazon, the author links to me. But anyway, Laura Mixon Camacho, PhD. You'll find me on LinkedIn. So, or Speak Up with Laura, also on Instagram.
And I will say I am in your mailing list. I highly recommend just being on your mailing list.
Oh, thank you.
To everything that you put out is very. It's just. I think clean is the way I would describe it, but it's clean and it's organized and it's very aesthetically pleasing the way you deliver information. So
thank you. That's very important to me.
And so your website, especially, it's beautiful. It really does look nice, and I did notice that.
Thank you.
So very well done there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Laura, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us.
Thank you.
We're gonna have to do a follow up here, maybe in a year or two, and see where you're at. And maybe will there be another book?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Thinking about it.
It's a big endeavor, so
it is a big. Yeah, now I know what's involved, but of course, like with everything, you think, oh, next time I'm going to do it this way instead of that way. So I've got all those ideas too.
Awesome. Well, I'm a huge fan of yours, and definitely looking forward to working with you. Definitely inside of my company, and then just kind of seeing where your company grows from here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on this program.
Thanks so much, Laura.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey y'all, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like or follow or subscribe, whatever platform you're on, just hit the button to make sure you don't miss any future episodes.
Yep, and please help us grow the channel by sharing it with someone else who might enjoy it as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.